Hey, good evening, everyone on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter Live, and all our other streaming channels. And tonight we have a very, very special show. Um, and we're going to talk about what I would consider the fragile vessel, the black woman. And I asked my illustrious two co hosts to do this show together. I thought that these two young ladies to do this show together would be interesting because both of them are, as we would say, fan favorites. Um, they haven't done a show together since the New Year's Eve show that we did together, which was really really fun and super cool, right? Um, so without even though they've both been on the platform many many times, um, Andrea, Drea, Black Girl Boston, Brown Girl Boston, Brown Girl Tribe, my ace, my ace from down yonder. Explain to everyone in the chat who you are, because I think a lot of times they see you on the show and they'll be like, oh, that's just his friend. Uh, they looking out for each other. She's on the platform with him. Explain to everybody who exactly you are.
Okay. So before we get into the title, so good evening, everyone. I'm Andrea, blogger, content creator, black woman, in love with my blackness, my melanin, and also too, like a dope individual. But we'll get into the titles. I'm an assistant professor and director of field education at the illustrious Tuskegee University, which is a historic Black college and university in Tuskegee, Alabama, and also a alum from there as well. So, I'm not just like Q's like homegirl, but I encompass a lot of things, and so you guys will find out a little bit more tonight as we get into the topic.
Miss Dozier, the author.
Yes. Good evening, everybody. My name is Julia Dozier. I'm an author. I focus on the health and well being of relationships within the African American or Black community. I currently have two published books. The first one is about self awareness and self identity for women and for men. The second one is about how Black men love. And I have a third upcoming book which should be published and released in September, is Black Women Love. So I conducted for each of the series, How Black Men Love and How Black Women Love, I conducted interviews with African American or Black men or women between the ages of 25 to 85 to understand their perspective of love and intimacy and relationships. So that's my passion. Professionally, I'm a businesswoman, and I focus on workforce management, policy and procedure, and finance. So that's what I do.
Great. Well, because of the subject matter, I won't say that I was misleading in the title. I'll just say that the title was very vague, where it said a fragile vessel, black women. So for the sake of algorithms, the misunderstanding of our educational and historical references, I had to kind of like curtail some of the wording. So we're gonna have a real serious discussion about the history of black women in this country. And it's not a history that we're going to talk about where it may seem like we're glorifying anything or praising anything. It's just, I think that a lot of people don't know. I think that a lot of people don't understand that every single person on the face of this earth that has any medical procedure done, any medication done, any blood work done, owes gratitude to one woman, and that's Henrietta Lacks. So this show is in her spirit, her family's spirit, who has never fully been compensated for her cells being used. And being that this is the month of Black August and it's about to end soon, we need to pay homage to our ancestor who um, we owe a lot of gratitude to, and to her family, to the Henrietta Lacks Foundation. Um, we owe a lot of gratitude to. So we dedicate this show on in her memory and in her name. Drea, you are going to lead us off and begin.
Okay, so I'm gonna quote this quote. Pretty much, I had wrote a publication about Black women being the most disrespected from a social worker standpoint because I have 15 years of clinical social work background. And so this quote is actually from one of the first African American social workers named Mary Church Terrell, if you all heard of her. So her quote said, "Nobody wants to know a colored woman's opinion about her status as that of her group. When she dares express it, no matter how mild or tactful it may be, it's called propaganda or is labeled as controversy." So I wrote this as part of a publication that I wrote, and it's interesting how it ties into what we're talking about today. So I talked a lot about just cultural competency and also the lack of since 1619 of being, our ancestors being forcefully removed from, the continent of Africa and violently brought here stateside. So I also discussed about not having agency over our minds and body. So at one point in time, when we was enslaved or our ancestors was enslaved, we didn't have agency over being raped, dealing with the cruelty of, you having a child in the field and you still got to go back to work, right? Also, too, thinking of just when you're trying to run away because your family have been ripped apart from you, you was actually diagnosed as having a issue with being a runaway slave, which is called drapomania. And this was actually in the DSM. So for anyone who knows about the DSM diagnostic, book that usually psychologists, social workers use, this was actually a issue of a diagnosis of like a mood disorder. Mind you, of course, a white man, was stated, well, they have an issue. You're getting fed, your house. Why you want to run away from, this condition? So it was actually a condition, and it was actually started by Dr. Samuel Cartwright. So in 1881, he claimed that it was a disease of the mind to run away and making themselves too familiar, with wanting to be part of the world. And it also says this is the symptoms now. Now, for our ancestors to be violently brought here, that our ancestors was diagnosed with this because they wanted to avoid work. But you came legally and illegally plenty of times to go and get our ancestors because you avoided to do the work, right? And we still being used as work labor and also to emotional labor on the workplace, but we'll talk about that as well later on. So that's something I really wanted to talk about and talk about. It was an untreated mental health. So if you all have followed Dr. Joy DeGruy, she talks about, post-traumatic slave syndrome. So she talks about this, and also to, coming out of just generations of dealing with if you ever heard of like psychosomatic, we still feel the vibration of just the torture, the trauma of our ancestors. And it could be 24 ancestors behind us, right? So that's what I wanted to open up with. And people don't understand like the things as Black women what we have to go through and still have to go through, and not discrediting Black men because you guys have your own struggles as well. But the sake of this topic, we're talking about just dealing with the mental health of Black women and how it's manifesting even in 2021.
Wow. Um, I told you guys I don't really have much to say during this show. I'm kind of like speechless. When we were all did our individual research for what we wanted to talk about, it kind of was very emotional because you could feel it. Julia said something to me this week where, what did you say, Julia, about your ancestors?
I said I could feel the ancestral as I was doing my research, and I had to. I have my own process for releasing emotions. I had to go through that process because it's very deep. It's very deep. And even though I've had like awareness of it, of course, as you said, I love to do research, so I have awareness of it. But researching in preparation for this show was different this go round. And I'm not quite sure why that was, but in my spirit, I believe it was so that I could arrive at my own level of healing around my own femininity and my own sexuality and my own sexual experiences. And doing the research allowed me to tap into that. The horrific things done to the women in our culture, and the things that are still being done today by our own hand, because the vibrations of what happened to us centuries ago, I'm talking about 400, 500 years ago, the vibrations of that live in our society today, where we don't even require a master to over sexualize us or to take advantage of our the sacredness of our bodies. We do that ourselves. So there's a lot of healing that needs to be done in that respect.
There's always been a thought that that one of the things with being a black woman is being strong. And I'm not a black woman. I came from a black woman. I was raised by a black woman. And I had two very, very strong black women grandmothers. One had 8 children, the other one had 7. And it's always been this thing, I'm a strong black woman. And I think that a lot of black women should take offense to this phrase.
I
The
do.
reason why
Mhm.
I think that, and I'm glad that you guys agree with me, but you don't have to agree with me. It's kind of like that's my personal thing, but I'm not a woman, so I can't tell y'all what to think or feel. But one of the issues why this thing was a strong black woman is because of what has happened to you guys, far as what the father of gynecology did. Um, I know Julia, you had really did some research on this guy. And would you like to elaborate on it?
Before I go into it, I just want to kind of touch on the idea of a strong black woman. The quote that opened up our show is, "What happened on the auction block centuries ago is still unfinished business for African American women today." And to Andrea's point, going back to the 1600s, black women were put on auction blocks in marketplaces, most oftentimes in front of their family, sometimes their husbands, their children, white men, white women, and they were evaluated on that block. Their breasts were pulled, their behinds were, measured. There was this idea of looking at them to see how strong they were in terms of being able to produce more slaves. So, for me now, the idea of a strong black woman is how much can you take? And I don't think that, we should be, when I looked at this research, like black women are not necessarily strong. We're survivors. We know how to survive. When you think about the fact that they were raped, as well as their men raped, they had their genitalia mutilated. They were forced to breastfeed children that were not their own. We carry the weight of that in our spirits and in our souls. So, I don't know if that's strength, but I do know that that's survival. That's a lot of mental and physical and emotional pain to undertake. And speaking of James Marion Sims, who's considered the father of modern gynecology, one of the things that he did under the premise that black women are strong was he performed multiple surgeries on hundreds, if not thousands, of women. And sometimes the same women repeatedly gynecological procedures without anesthesia, because the idea was that Black women were strong. So can you imagine a Black woman laying on the table, screaming, crying, and hollering as her ovaries and her fallopian tubes, her whole system is being violated, so that they could learn how to perfect these procedures, not for us, but for white women.
Mm-mm.
And today you have, I'm sorry, Drea, today we're so over sexualized that we don't even really have an opportunity to appreciate and respect our sexuality as women or Black men or as couples. We have to start seeing each other as sacred, I believe, and that's all I got for right now.
Right.
One of
I
the
totally agree.
one of the phrases that I thought would be interesting, and Bettina Judd was a historian, I think. She said, because a lot of people asked, with his studies, were they with consent? And we need to understand that this man he owned slaves.
Mm-hmm.
He owned subjects, as he would say. And she said, and I think this is so profound, even to this day, when it comes to consent and violating somebody's physical space. She said consent isn't always about whether you can say yes. It's also whether you can say no.
Right.
Because a lot of times people are put in positions where they can't say no.
Or they do say no and it's not acknowledged.
Exactly. It's totally ignored. And
Dre,
to piggyback what Julia has said, it's very ironic and awful how we, was deemed as experimental, and then look in 2021, we're still experimenting with ourselves. We're getting Brazilian butt lifts, and I don't know if you all have read a recent article. That's like the number one killer. So many Black women are dying on these procedure tables because of you want to get you want to accentuate what we already naturally have, and we're more than our bodies, right? And somewhere down the line, as you have said, Julia, we have over sexualized ourselves. We forgot about the sacred femininity, because I guess the strong Black woman narrative, I gotta be kind of like the chick wearing the pants. um Instead of really tapping into who we are as Black women. And I don't ever say like, oh, I'm a Black woman and I'm strong. I'm an alchemist because I can make things happen, baby. Like I come from a line of alchemists of women, and being able to come from that lineage of slaves and sharecroppers, and to be the first, to be in my family, to go to college and to be a professor, baby, I'm a whole alchemist out here in these streets. And I get to turn around the lineage. So, hence why it's interesting we talk about being a strong Black woman, because in my lecture on Tuesday, I actually had one of my students ask me, she was like, well, professor, how come we always got to be the strong Black women? Like, how come we always have to, save the workplace, save the voting, save this, save that? But who told us we have to do that? Who gave us permission to say, what, y'all gotta go save the world again because we gotta get such and such out of office. So Black women, y'all gotta be on y'all job. And we're already not paying attention to, ourselves. We're not giving ourselves the energy. We're not coming home and being able to give our, significant others the energy, our children, if we have them. It's always external instead of going internal and say, you know what, I got to save myself and turn around this whole trajectory of being the strong Black woman.
I think a lot of that comes from the historical roots of, like, when I think about the surgical procedures without the anesthesia, what it suggests to me is that there's this idea that we can endure anything. And I don't think that has gone away. I don't think that that's gone away. I think we still have that put on us, that we can endure anything because we have endured everything.
Right.
But I don't want to do that no more. I don't choose that.
For you guys in the chat, I know that Drea has been on the platform quite a few times. We actually did a show that was titled Live from Tuskegee. And I think that a lot of people don't understand that Drea is a professor, an alumni at a university that is a historically Black college.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it is literally a crime scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the situation we are in now, where a lot of people have tried to minimize that crime scene that took place in Tuskegee because of what's going on now, and they're telling people to trust the science, and I'm all for trusting in the science. However, that does not minimize the crime scene.
Right.
Ground zero, sacred ground, hallowed ground. So sometimes when we're speaking, some people, we have information and we bring forth information, but to walk on ground zero, to breathe the air of the crime scene, I don't think people understand that her eyeballs literally has seen the crime scene.
Definitely. And more. And more. Every time I walk on campus, it's like, yo, it's a sacred space for me. To the point, I remember when I moved in my freshman year 20 years ago, my uncle came up from South Alabama, helped my mom and I move in my dorm. My uncle literally cried. He's like, I can feel all of our ancestors and all the sacrifices to get where you're at. So you better not mess this up, right? And I remember him crying, like, yo, this is sacred grounds. And I tell my students this all the time, yo, this is a privilege to be at this university because of not just, Booker T. Washington, all these amazing things, but also too, also what happened, with just the experiment. Also too, like I mentioned, we have 3 museums, and one of the museums is the Legacy Museum, which actually talks about, Henrietta Lacks and all the apologies and all the atrocities that happened to Black Americans, not just within Tuskegee, but also in the state of Alabama that people don't talk about. 30 minutes away in Montgomery, where Dr. Sims was performing these, atrocious and horrific, experiments on Black bodies, there was actually warehouses where Black bodies was being, experimented on. And so that's why I always tell people, if you come to Alabama, we have such a rich history as far as it's another legacy museum there, that talks about enslavement to, what's happening now. It's crazy.
One of the ways that me and Drea met about 3 years ago is in the circles speaking about reparations. And one of the things about reparations that we can't allow to get lost in the translation is our medical reparations. What was done, experiments, as Julia said, Black women who were considered subjects no anesthesia, um, with all their goodies wide open, not for them, for other people. So we need to really, really consider what a lot of the women go through, and a lot of black women go through, and hold them to a standard that they deserve to be held. And even nowadays, it is countless women. I don't know if you guys know about how many black women die giving birth in this country.
Astronomical.
It is, yes.
Astronomical.
And how many black women have been misdiagnosed and had a procedure done from a misdiagnosed and now could never have children.
Mm-hmm.
Or died from lacerations during procedures,
Mm-hmm.
or were recommended to have hysterectomies when that was the most aggressive
Mm-hmm.
procedure that could be done, when there were other methods that could have been available, or who have children who are low birth weight because they don't receive proper prenatal care, or who have a higher incidence than any other race of HIV, STIs, gonorrhea, chlamydia, everything, because we don't receive sexual education. We don't receive knowledge about our bodies, not from schools, but just it's not conversation that we have within our families about how to protect our bodies. We're the only culture, I believe, that doesn't have a ritual or a ceremony about growing from puberty into adulthood. The only culture in this country.
I don't know how many people in the chat or who will view the show. You know, one of the a viral video, and sometimes we see viral videos of some of our sheroes and ancestors, and we think that the video is all who they is. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the viral videos of Fannie Lou Hamer talking about the blood and the flag.
Yep.
If you understood what was done to this woman,
Exactly.
and she still never gave up. She adopted children.
Mm-hmm.
She was the cause of the March on Washington.
Right.
She was the real organizer of the march, and I think that people just don't understand what you guys are going through, and even now to this day.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. And I mean, like, far as with me, I almost had a situation in which I had almost had a forced hysterectomy at in mid 30s, because I had fibroids. And I remember the doctor's like, "Oh, you gotta get a hysterectomy." I was like, "Absolutely not." I was like, "I'm gonna get a second, third opinion, and I will pay whatever it's gonna pay." So, a lot of times too, we have to be advocates. And a lot of times we don't have people advocating for us, especially on the mental health side. When you have fields such as the field I'm in, being a social worker, is 70% white women. So that's why I go so hard on my students to produce more Black social workers, but not with a Eurocentric standpoint, from an Afrocentric standpoint, like, look, we have other issues that's going on. And at one point in time, you may become a client. So, that's why you need to go hard with advocacy. And a lot of us, are afraid. We still have that stigma with with doctors. We still have the stigma with, mental health professionals, because they don't look like us. And we're so underrepresented because we don't have the funds, to go to medical school, or to go get your, MSW, or to go get your, psychiatrist, degree, whatever the case is. And so, a lot of times we get frightened. And then once again, it's that stigma still being passed down. So, I always suggest, for us as Black women, and just like as Black people, we just have to keep advocating. And, we have to go to the policies and procedures. Like, we have to fight for policies to change. So I love seeing so many Black doulas, are in those spaces now, because when you are, let's say, incapacitated, you have your birth plan, and at least you have a doula to advocate for you, which we need. Because once again, a lot of these women been having children. Oh, she don't need anesthesia. She don't need that. She don't need an epidural, and like literally dying, on the birthing table. And a lot of times we giving birth wrong anyways, and they're going against your birthing plan. So, I'm glad that a lot of these programs are coming out, and also too, it needs to be more research done. It's only 4% of African Americans in the research field, period. And they're begging, us to become researchers because we're so, once again, underrepresented. And I feel like if we're going to have a health disparity, we need to have more African American representative, because what do white people know about us? We've been dealing with atrocities since 1600s all the way up to now. And a lot of times we've been misdiagnosed, even with mental health misdiagnoses. So, we need a lot more of us in spaces in which, we can give the correct diagnoses, and also too, that we can speak to our people on a certain level too. Because, sometimes we got to speak to our people on a certain level for them to understand as well. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you guys a question. And Julia, you can answer the question first. How, without a male that's in a black man understanding, doing the research, and knowing what you guys go through, how is it better for them to understand? Like, you guys got both of you guys got brothers, male cousins, and a lot of times, it's always said that the males, your counterparts, really don't get it. Like Julia said when you opened up, we both had our atrocities done to us. However, we see certain things like different from what's going on with them attacking black male masculinity right now. And you guys have seen like the medical stuff, procedures done. Like, we don't know nothing about that. We hear it on, and it's like, what you mean? What you mean? The doctor telling you you can't have children, and that may be one of the things that you want to have. And being misdiagnosed, how better can the males understand what you guys are going through?
So I don't think that it's a matter of how women need to communicate it, because I think women are always communicating what they think, what they feel, and what they need. I think it's a matter of men being able to listen and wanting to listen. And I think that begins with being able to stop seeing women as objects and see us as vessels, and understand that we're vessels that carry life if we are able to. That we're vessels that support life, our communities, our work, men as well. We're vessels, and we have emotions and feelings, and these very important issues that we have to deal with. And that sometimes it's difficult for us to have conversations with men when we know that we're being viewed as objects, because how well can you listen to me if you're not seeing me beyond what I can do for you or what you can get from me? So, the first thing is being able to see us as vessels, to see us as human organisms, very delicate, very delicate. The same as men, emotions, our emotions, our psychology, our thoughts, our feelings, our bodies, just to see us. I remember one time my brother, my beautiful baby brother, as I call him, he was complaining to me about one of his girlfriends that, one week she'd be okay, and the next week she'd have a problem, and the next week she'd be okay. And I had to explain to him, I said, Jordan, I said, I didn't mean to call him out like that, but I said, Jordan, I said, you have to understand that your woman has an ecosystem happening inside of her, right? That she has 3 weeks, possibly within a month, where her body is going through constant change. And through all that change, she still has to show up for work. She still has to show up for school. She still has to show up for her friends. She has to show up for you. And those changes that are happening in her body are not only physical, they're also emotional and psychological. So understand that and try to get in tune with her rhythm. Try to get in tune with her rhythm. Ask her how she's feeling. How are you feeling today? You know, it's simple things like that, but you have to want to do that. You have to want to do that.
And before you answer, before you Dre, I'm quite sure you got some information to give on this that question. It's always perceived, Julia, to speak to how your brother may have perceived it, definitely from a man, is, oh, she tripping, she
Right.
tripping. Instead of realizing, like you said, 3 weeks out of the month, her body is going through changes, and that one week is really going through changes. But she's going through something physically and emotionally, and she can't really explain what's going on, but you just got to understand what's going on. I think that was a great explanation, Julia.
Yeah, and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
women, as women, we have to be in tune with our bodies as well. We have to understand what's going on with us as well. And sometimes, because we're not educated about our bodies or have those conversations, sometimes it can take us longer to understand the rhythms and the patterns that we're experiencing.
Dre, did you have something to answer to that question?
I think that as far as what if you're gonna be in partnership with someone, accommodation, take them to the appointments. Y'all should go to
Mm,
appointments together. I can say this about my brother and about my uncles. I don't know because my mom probably drilled it in him, but I know my brother, he takes his wife to every appointment. My uncles take their wives to every appointment. And be like, all right, so what's going on? What do I need to do? Accommodation. And that also builds the synergy of the relationship to a deeper level too. Because imagine you going to an appointment by yourself and hearing, let's say you got breast cancer. You're dealing with that trauma by yourself. So I feel that if couples really want to build and be on a spiritual level, you should definitely accommodate one another and encourage one another. Maybe your significant other is just so traumatized by the diagnoses, your significant other needs to step in and be like, okay, so what's going on? Give me the rundown. Boom, boom, boom. All right, what do we need to do? So, I don't think we see that enough because like what Julia said, it's more like, well, what can you do for me materially? One day, the material doesn't count because if you don't got your mental health, you don't got your physical health. Okay, that's cool. You got that Birkin bag, but that's not going to save you from getting that diagnosis of cancer, whatever the case is. So I think we need to be a little bit more accommodating, and also too, really being in tune with, hey, what's going on? I noticed you didn't get your period. I noticed this didn't happen. I'm noticing you having mood swings. Is something situational going on at the job, at home, whatever the case is, because we're all our bodies interconnected and interdependent. So if you off in one area, please believe everything else is going to be off. So I think we need to be more accommodating so we can build that whole synergy of an actual loving relationship, besides something material.
yes.
Another question is, I know that Drea, this is for both of y'all, but I'm gonna just use your example that you have, Drea. I know that one of your biggest titles in your name is Brown Girl Tribe. Um, and we talk a lot about, in our communities, we talk a lot about the village raising us and understanding um, what was done to us. Like, we were a tribe when we got taken. We were a tribe or tribes. When we came here, um, we were named black, so to say. We were no longer a tribe, and that village concept kind of left, where a lot of people don't have, and some of us of a certain age now, we reflect on having the big mama, the aunt, that one aunt that just was the emotional aunt, and she knew everything. What allowed you, Drea, to name it Brown Girl Tribe, and getting that village concept into your name?
Well, actually, the whole name came about when I was a student at Tuskegee. They're like, "That's the brown girl from Boston," because they thought everybody from Boston was white. So, but just even having a commanding presence with not just my homegirl, because I'm not a feminist at all. So, people see that like, oh, she's talking about, just for women. I'm talking about the people who look like me. Because like I said, they was like, well, she's not black, she's brown. So, that's how it started. But also being a tribe because, once again, having Southern roots, but being a Northern girl, being an East Coast girl, it always been about the tribe. It's always been about, all right, how is the tribe? We're going to do things as a tribe, as a tribe, whether it was my parents and our family or our extended family, and that's what I seen growing up. My parents first going to Boston and then bringing the other tribal members to Boston, from Alabama to Boston. Also, too, I'm speaking, to my tribe. I have to sometimes I gotta speak to them on a certain level. Sometimes I have to raise their vibration by speaking to them or just even showing up as I am. And I have a lot of men who come to me for coaching. I have a lot of men like, can you talk to my BM? I'm like, did she give you consent for me to like talk to her? What are you not doing, bruh? So so it's a tribe thing, like how you have a tribe called Quest. So I was like, oh, I always like I'm a wordsmith, being a blogger, and I was like, okay, Brown Girl Tribe, we a tribe. So if we're gonna be a tribe, we need to get it together on all spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional. So that's how I came up with the term, because at the end of the day, we do have to look at ourselves as a tribe, because who's gonna save us but us?
Like I said, in the beginning of the show, that this show is, I asked these two young ladies to do the show, and then we discussed what the show would be about. And I'm quite sure it's a lot of information that they still haven't even scratched the surface on. But I just want to remind everybody that this show is strictly dedicated to Henrietta Lacks. Um, I highly recommend that everybody follow the Henrietta Lacks Foundation. We need to be in support of her family getting their reparations. Her cells were used without her knowledge, and thankfully, with Oprah's movie that she did on the family, a lot of people kind of like got aware of it. But it's always been like a urban myth, but it's not a myth; it's a true story. So we need to understand of what this Shiro, this ancestor, did for us, and and the rest of our female ancestors did for us with forced experiments. We need to keep that in keep those thoughts and understanding moist and moist on our tongues, and understanding what has happened, and not minimize what anybody has been through, any trauma that anybody has been through, let alone if that's one of the things that both of you young ladies know, that I really don't understand when people start going into the gender war thing. Is like, it ain't like she wasn't on the auction block with you. You were both on the auction block together. Um, and the whole theory of being auctioned, like a woman being auctioned for her body parts, a man being auctioned for his body parts, a woman, um, basically, if she can't bear children, she's of no use. And if she is a woman that can bear children, being forced to have, we're not talking about
Twins.
10, we're
10,
talking about maybe
Twins.
forced to have 20, 30
20,
children.
30 children,
20
breeding like
children
animals.
breeding.
Yeah. So I know you still had a lot of stuff you wanted to address, Julia, but you
Yeah.
needed a moment. You gave me that look like, let me get a breather real quick. Let me get a breather real quick, right?
This has been so difficult, especially because, you know, to the point that you raised, Quentin, when you talk about the gender war. I don't think that we really understand that a lot of the ways that we communicate with each other has been socialized for us, initially socialized for us, and now it's socialized by us. And, I think one of the things that we miss is that all of us have been at a disadvantage at one point or another, and experienced, difficult, painful, hard situations. But at some point, we have to learn how to heal, if not individually, then as a collective, because I can't go through everything I go through as a woman and then deal with you telling me about how I have masculine energy, or how I'm a man hater. And like, I'm just looking for you to be sensitive and understanding and compassionate towards me, you know? And I want to be able to do the same thing for you. And, you know, I think we have to get to that. We have to get to that point. We have to understand that we've been socialized to be hard towards one another.
It's funny you brought that up. I was having a discussion with a friend of mine who's not black American, and we were talking about something in the medical industry, and I was explaining something to her, and her response was, and I don't think she was being unsensitive or not lack of understanding, but it's just sometimes a person just don't know.
Right.
She said to me, I can't imagine living in that type of fear. And I wanted to tell her, like, you know, I don't know where a lot of people get their education from, far as not their formal education. I'm talking about the generational education, their family history. Well, one of the places where I got a lot of my family history was at the kitchen table.
Yay.
Mm-hmm.
Yay.
And to not understand that fear, that being afraid, that hatred, is mind boggling, and I don't get upset with people that's not black American because they don't understand. I get upset with them when they don't want to listen to someone who's trying to explain it to them.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
If somebody is explaining to you why they do not trust a particular thing, instead of trying to force them to get them to understand your point of view, you should listen to what they're saying.
Right.
Um, and I think that that's one of the biggest issues now is people don't understand the fear of, oh, they'll say, well, black men don't like going to the doctor. I'm a black man and I go to the doctor regularly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm proud to say I go to the doctor regularly. My
Good.
grandmother was a registered nurse.
Hmm.
I have no problem with the medical industry, but I do like to question a lot of things and I like that information.
Right.
So I think that instead of saying why black men, or like it's a bad thing that black men don't like going to the doctor, it's a reason.
It's a
Mm-hmm.
It's a reason why black women don't want a procedure done. I mean, Drea, you spoke about it when you spoke about the thyroid, and I've know hundreds of women who have spoken about this thyroid issue. I'm just learning about it, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm a baby with it. And it's like so many people have been misdiagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
Thyroids or fibroids?
Well,
Fibroids. That's it. That's the
fibroids.
word. That's
Boy,
it. See,
Yeah,
I don't even know.
fibroids.
I don't even know the
And I
word,
dealt with
Julia.
thyroid too, because that's another issue with black Americans as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see, I don't even know the word, Julia. Fibroid, thyroid. See, I'm learning. So I think that one of the biggest things that like Julia said when she answered my question is, instead of coming from a place of assuming, come from a place of trying to get
An understanding.
an
Right.
understanding of what actually the person could be going through.
Mm-hmm.
With definitely a woman with her body and you know dealing with this type of society, even up until this day, because um, for lack of better words, and I'm not taking nothing away from our Native Americans and what they went through, but to use their phrase, we have a trail of tears that have been way longer than anybody historically.
Right.
So, you guys got, I know you got a lot to say there, Julia.
Well, Quentin, I just wanted to touch upon something very important that you said. You said that you were not afraid to go to the doctor because, of course, you have someone in the medical field in your family, right? So you have that first level of trust. And then you also are a researcher. And I think, a lot of us in our community tend to rely upon what doctors tell us. When we go to the doctor, we tend to rely upon what they tell us. But to Drea's point, what she said earlier, sometimes there hasn't been enough research done on a particular illness or a particular organ in the body within our culture to understand what type of treatment will be best for us. And so sometimes it's important for us to not be afraid to have conversations with our medical providers as to whether or not that procedure is the right thing for us. The other thing is that if I can share my personal experience, I also have experience with fibroids. I was initially diagnosed with fibroids, I think when I was about 25, 26, and I had 3 surgeries. And after each surgery, they returned, and I said, something's wrong either with the surgical procedures or there's a way that my body is responding that's allowing these things to come back. Let me study. The last time I went to the doctor, they were like, oh, you need another procedure. It was like, no way. I don't feel like giving you $50,000 on something that you haven't been able to treat in the last 15 years. So let me research what's going on with my body and how my body, why this is happening in my body. And through my research, I was able to identify that a certain way of eating and exercising and being rest and getting rest and not being in chronically stressful situations allowed me to be healthier and even get to a point where my fibroids are shrinking without surgical intervention. So sometimes we have to do that research. We have to push back. We have to ask questions. And we have to know whether or not the procedure that's being recommended for us is right for us.
Right.
Based on our genes and our body structure and things of that nature.
Exactly.
You think that one of the issues it sounds crazy what I'm about to say, but I don't think most people think about this. I had an uncle that passed away, and he used to always talk about eating right and understanding that our bodies, our skeleton frame was not created for this land and this culture, as far as like the weather and so forth and so on. So he would always be like, watch what you eat, make sure you don't, eat too much flesh. This was before the vegan thing even became a vegan, I think.
Right.
He used to make these shout out to my uncle too. He used to make this thing called sausages, right? He used to call them sausages, but they were made of fish. They were literally fish. So he used to always speak about that and understanding that, even dealing with AMA, and I'm not talking about American Music Awards. I'm saying AMA for the algorithm. We needed to dig a deep dive on why AMA was created. Like I said, I am not a proponent of science. I'm not against science. I am not against the medical industry. But we need to understand why AMA was created and why what we consider natural remedies are now considered alternative remedies.
Right.
Which is weird when you think about it, because even Hippocrates, who was considered the first doctor of modern science, if you ever understand any of his works, he used herbs.
Right.
He used herbs. So, Dre, I know you still have some more to say. Like I said, don't, I don't want the show to be too like, I know it gets to a point when we talk about, like I said, a lot of stuff that you guys have went through, it gets a little emotional. So I don't want to seem like we're doing a Debbie Downer show.
Nah, it's an informative show. But to piggyback off you, what she has said, being active, being athletic, from 4 years old to now, I actually had a white physician tell me that as far as being African American, we are eating wrong. We need to eat from the ground. And going back to my parents are older. They had me older. My parents from rural Alabama. So my parents really ate meat. Like my parents was like, meat was a Sunday treat for them. It was like, oh, Sunday we eating chicken, and it wasn't fried chicken. And then also too, where the land where my mom grew up on, their neighbor, and actually this guy just died like a few years ago. He used to slaughter hogs. And so he used to give, like my grandma and them, a piece of the hog because it was 7 of them. And so my mom was like, no, we used to eat beans, okra, collard greens. They ate a plant-based, as they would deem now, plant-based. So I grew up eating that stuff. So when I see like some of my cousins that's from the country, like, oh girl, we don't eat that. We eat McDonald's. No, sis, that's why you have health issues. And people always be like, how old's your mother? She don't got health issues. I'm like, yeah, because she took care of her body way back then. But once again, it goes to supreme discipline. It goes back to understanding and knowing who your ancestors are and what did they eat. Having those conversations with your aunties, if you got your grandparents alive, like, well, what did y'all eat? Like what helped y'all sustain y'all? And also too, they wasn't sedentary like we are. They was working in the fields. They was, I had an uncle all the way up, so he was 90 years old, driving his tractor 5 o'clock in the morning when I used to spend my summers with my uncle. 5 o'clock in the morning. Oh, I got y'all some peas. I got y'all some greens, and had a garden. So that's why I garden, because of just, I go back to eating from the earth. It's very rare that I eat fast food. It's very rare. Like now I have to change up my whole diet, with just even limiting, animal protein, because it doesn't feel good when I eat it. Even though I love some wings, I love wings, don't get me wrong, but when I eat it, I don't feel the best. Even with dairy, we got to get away from that, the cow's milk. So, we have to really try what works best for our body and have supreme discipline and focus, and really that's once again, being in tune with our bodies, being connected spiritually to say, this don't work. Let me try something else. Also too, I'm a big component of quote unquote alternative medicine. That's how I actually kind of got cured from when I had my thyroid. I went to an acupuncturist. Acupuncture saved my life. I don't care how much it costs. I'm like, how much it costs? I was like coming out of pocket, going to acupuncture like twice a week. Now I go once a month just for the routine. But once again, we can't just always deem it, oh, that's white people stuff. And we need to get out of that too, because if you really go do the knowledge and the research, a lot of our ancestors created that. So, we have to not always just, sometimes we got to combine Western medication along with the alternative medication. Same way with mental health. People like, I'm just gonna pray it away. Yeah, but God's also leading you to a therapist, but you're not really in tune with that. So, we just have to go back to basics. We really have to. And sometimes we, like you said, Julia, get out these stressful situations. Like sometimes we got to look at our living condition. How can we live a simple life? When you live a simple life, that's the best life, because you're not out here chasing the bag. I'm out here chasing the bag. Because you keep chasing the bag, that's going to drive you to an early grave, because you're under stress, and stress is the number one killer.
Number one killer.
One of the things that we mentioned, and shout out to the brother who did the and I gotta give him a plug, the documentary on Netflix, High Off the Hog. If you watch that documentary, it'll basically,
that was so good.
The elder that was over in Africa, she basically explained the history of some of the tribes that were brought over here, and what they bought, the foods that they bought, and understanding, like Drea went into saying, understanding your body structure. I know a lot of doctors nowadays, a little bit different than before, is they try to ask you your family history. And it's best that everybody ask those questions to your elders, and who had what, who's diagnosed with this and what this. Sometimes we always talk about, and I know you two are going to smile when I bring up this word. Sometimes we always talk about generational curses. I don't believe in generational curses. I believe in people not being forthwith with information.
Right.
Because information is power.
Yes, it is.
I know Dwayne has said in the chat that he would tell the difference from eating in New Jersey compared to when he would just go a couple miles down the road in Virginia to his family's farm.
Yes.
And we sometimes think because we live in quote unquote the city that we can't have a garden. I know, Drea, you had started a garden right during the middle of the pandemic.
Exactly. On my 1 acre of land. And I want to mention this too real quick. I knew that even though I'm a brown girl from Boston, I'm a Bostonian by birth. I knew the city life wasn't for me. I was like, whoa, I'm not subscribing to hustle and bustle. I'm subscribing to, yeah, I'm gonna be low key, laid back. And that's why I end up coming to school in Alabama, because it's low key, it's laid back, and it's affordable. So I can live my best life on my 1 acre of land. And I don't have to work 2, 3 jobs. Because I look at some of my family members like, how do y'all live in Boston and work 2, 3 jobs just to maintain rent? Not a mortgage, rent.
Right.
Okay. And then that's why the fast food and the hefty, hospital bills, because that's not conducive to us. If you think about our ancestors, they lived in rural areas, and they live off the land. So, I tap back into that, and that works for me. It may not work for other people.
Yeah.
One of the things, it's funny you said that, Drea. my niece and her family live in Alabama as well. He's actually from South Side of Chicago, the hood, and she's from New Jersey, and they both went to graduate school down in Alabama, and they both decided to stay in Alabama. And I always mess with her. I'll be like, yo, what, you like it down there? She loves it down there. I think she likes it because you have that rural, laid back type of feel. And if you want to do city, you could always drive to one of the historically cities that have a lot of our culture there.
Mm-hmm.
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 Julia,
Yes.
I know you just, I kind of like, I don't know if we went too far or too left or too right. I mean, what's your thoughts? I know that you were very and I hear I always throw my little shots messing with people. I know that you were very close with your grandfather.
Yes. Yes.
Speak about that, like how him understanding women was able to convey to you that you learned a lot about who you are through your grandfather.
Through my grandfather, but through my elders in general. Through my elders in general. I am so grateful, and just I feel so blessed that I grew up in a time where I was able to be close to my elders. Um, my great aunties who were 60, 70 years older than me, that could tell me stories about their lives, and like how important my being a woman was, and what it meant for me to be a woman, and my responsibility, not only as a woman in the world, but a woman in my family. Like the expectations I had to uphold, as a woman, having character and integrity, and trying to do my best. I was young, I had my moment, right? But then those things always come back to you. Like, I represent my tribe. My family is my first tribe, and I represent my family. And being able to see the women in my family, even with everything that they survived, how they were able to be successful in their careers, or in their relationships, as much as they could control it, and in the world, and how they helped others. And with my grandfather, it might sound a little weird, but a lot of what he was able to teach me about how important I was, and how much I needed to protect myself, is because at one point in his life, he was a womanizer. And so he would tell me, he would put me up on game. He wouldn't call it that, but he would put me up on game. He realized that what he was doing was self-serving.
Mm.
And he realized that a lot of the relationships that he was having was to satisfy something that was missing in him, that he didn't know how to fulfill. And that he used a lot of people along the way. And he was very apologetic about that. And I think one of the ways he tried to reconcile that, or to ask forgiveness for that, was to confess those things to me. and to make sure that I was connecting myself with people who valued me and who loved me and who adored me and cherished me like he did. You know, that you're gonna make me cry, Quentin.
Well, you know,
You're gonna make me cry, Quentin.
to, se- to segue into to something else that we had discussed earlier about the myth of black people not being able to endure pain. I have a PDF file. Anybody that wants to study that was done on the historical aspect of surgery and why this stuff was done without anesthesia to black people. This has always been a myth that black people could withstand more pain than others. So if you want the PDF file, just email me at ltalk5600.com. I mean, at gmail.com. I have it. It's a very interesting read. It's only 6 pages. It's not real wordy. And I think that a lot of people could benefit from. One of the issues that I wanted to segue on, it's a touchy subject because we're dealing with 50 years, I guess, Roe versus Wade. And a lot of people love to say, my body, my choice, whether you're pro or against that procedure done. One of the organizations that I have disdain for is Planned Parenthood. And I don't know you guys' opinion on Planned Parenthood. I've never asked y'all privately. So this will be the first time we talk about Planned Parenthood. And the reason why I bring it up is because of the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, and how she was a strong racist, a strong advocate of eugenics. So I have my theory on the essence and the origin of Planned Parenthood. I know that a lot of people feel like they've done good in our communities. That's neither here nor there. um, I have my reasons why they are in predominantly black communities and what they recommend. I think that the people who work there that don't understand historically of what started that, I hope that they're coming from a genuine place because getting and talking to that woman about her body and her choice is a very sacred and serious responsibility. So I hope that anybody there is coming from a very, very good place and be able to understand that you're not just talking to a woman, you're talking to a fragile vessel. So, with that, I'm gonna ask you guys your thoughts on Planned Parenthood. I mean, it's no right or wrong answer. I mean, whatever you say is what you believe. I mean, you guys are, you know, Julia. I know that you're both of you guys are city gals living in the country now. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm quite sure you've heard some stories about that organization and what they do. You guys want to answer or no mas? No
Drea,
more.
you want to go first?
I, I really don't like that term, my body, my choice, because I feel that it's an agenda behind it when it comes to Black women. Because going back to what I was talking about earlier, my body, my choice, we often forget the mental health piece and the trauma that you have to heal going through such a traumatic procedure, right? And I think a lot of times we're like, oh my God, it's my body, my choice, but yet you're used as a work mule to save the world, especially or sometimes being a tool for white supremacy. I am, all about, yes, having ownership of your body, but also too, whenever you are part of the extermination process of Black babies, I have a problem with that, and especially if you're using it as birth control. Because yeah, you may think I'm all good in the hood. I just got this procedure done. You're getting it multiple times. I can imagine your spirituality. Your spirit is broken. I can imagine your mental health because it's kind of like, are they giving you an exit counseling? I highly doubt it. They probably like, okay, take these medications, go take a week off, peace out. What is the actual long-term effects that we don't have the discussions about with your mind, body, and your spirit? Also too, how they are actually inserted, like you did say, Q, in our communities, and why no one ever have these conversations about it. And it's just a traumatic thing that no one don't want to have the conversation about. It's like, let's sweep it underneath the rug. And I think it's a high percentage of abortions as far as within our community. I forgot the percentage, but you mentioned that, child, people will beat you down. Oh, so you saying that people got ownership over our bodies? Once again, as being a Black woman, we have ownership to a certain extent, but a lot of times we give our bodies up, and we give it up without permission as well. So that's my stance on it.
Yeah, yeah. Like you said, it does need it before Julia go. It does need to be some serious discussion and no concrete answer. I don't know if no concrete answer will ever get done with this particular topic. I think that even when you look at the historical landmark ruling in Roe versus Wade, if you really look into the case, something that I had to study for a particular thing, it was racism involved in the case.
Mhm.
I know it
Hmm.
sounds crazy
Hmm.
and it sounds far fetched to people in the
Everything.
chat. You'd be like, what the race got to do with Roe versus Wade? It was the reason why race got involved in it. And I think that's ever been public information and people understood. So my body, my choice, and understanding what from the eugenics thing, from what Dre even spoke about earlier, feminism, and how all these forces and isms have always been a big thorn in our arm.
I want no parts of the isms. I want no
Right.
parts of the isms. And
Me neither.
I'm gonna tell you why. Because number one, that slogan, my body, my choice, is nothing that a Black woman has ever said. She didn't originate that, and she doesn't go around saying that. And in the order of policy and rights in this country, the order is, as far as I have seen, white men, Black women, white women, and maybe Black women. So when they're saying my body, my choice, they're not including me in that conversation. They're not including me in that conversation, because including me or including us in that conversation would be making sure that we also have access to health care. So
Hmm.
the other ism that I have a problem with is racism, because when you look at it historically, we have not had access to health care. We have not had access to centers where we could, if we wanted to, learn about our bodies, learn about family planning, get access to things that we need to protect ourselves, to protect, for men to protect women and women to protect men. We don't get those things, but what we do get is centers where we could take care of the accident once it happens. And why is that able to be done? Because 9 times out of 10, you don't need health insurance in order to get that done. And so if you had health insurance, that would not be your first step. And so
Mm.
how do you get health insurance? You get health insurance by being employed. How do you get employed? You get employed by having companies and businesses that are willing to employ you. So to me, it's a whole system. The
Hmm.
whole economic system is connected to our health outcomes. So my body, my choice, I don't want to hear about that. When it comes down to that, for me, it's about eating well,
Right.
taking care of my body, making smart choices for myself, even in terms of sexual partners. Don't nobody want no community penis. Like I'm sorry.
Facts.
Black women have the highest occurrence of STIs and HIV, and we're not giving it to ourselves. We're not giving it to ourselves.
Well,
I'm sorry.
it's interesting. No. It's interesting because even in the height of the pandemic, one of the medical people. Some people will say he's an expert. Some people say he's a crook. I'm not going to mention his name. Even he mentioned how the pandemic was ravaging the black communities,
Oh.
and it's one thing to say it, to acknowledge, we have a problem here. But it's another thing to actually remedy the problem.
Mm,
And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, that is the issue that we continue to go. Most people will
mm,
be like, well, why y'all still fighting over reparations? Because that reparations is reparative
Right.
justice. Um,
Exactly.
Understanding that, we, like you guys have shown, we've been pushed out of having proper health care. Now, I know a lot of people in the last 10, 15 years, healthcare, big pharma, this has been like a major discussion. And like Julia said, for the young, um, unsure couple, she can have that procedure done without medical insurance.
Mm-hmm.
When we think about that and think about why I am personally, I'm against these facilities being in certain areas because I think they're strategically in certain areas, not as a situation to give people advice. And in these
Mm-mm.
disadvantaged areas, these places are put in these areas for that. And you could actually look up the numbers and how many procedures are done in particular areas because all this stuff is public information. And they collect data to track. So when you look at that, getting a procedure done is easier, and for a person to get a procedure done than to have medical insurance. Then we go all the way back to historically. She has heard what has done to all her ancestors from that auction block on down.
Mm-hmm.
And then we sometimes don't understand the emotional trauma that she has been bearing, and then she bores into this world because she's a vessel. She's a giver of life.
Right.
So it's like a perpetual amount of fear, a perpetual amount of anger, a perpetual amount of disdain and
I,
contempt. Go ahead,
Mm-hmm.
Julia.
before Drea speaks, I just wanted to add that the reason why we find most of those centers in our communities or in impoverished communities is because in impoverished communities is where you see the greatest number of high risk behaviors. And high risk behaviors meaning drug use, unprotected sex, multiple sex partners, those kinds of things. That's where you see those high risk behaviors. And that's why those centers are there because they know the outcome of that.
Right.
And instead of buying, Birkin bags and, Range Rovers,
Shots fired.
investing
Shots fired.
instead of investing in our communities where people could go to, if not resolve all of the issues around being in an impoverished area, just giving access to information in a safe space
Mm-hmm.
so you can protect your body and be able to make a choice about your life and your body.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Dre,
No, Julia said it all. I definitely agree. And I think also too, like if we are going to once again, if we're like, hey, we want our children to go to college, we need to push them into these majors where you see a disproportional of health science. Somebody got to be the scientist, the social scientist to do these studies on why these impoverished places have these dysfunctional behaviors. Where's the study for that? Where's the study at instead of gentrifying these areas? How can we
Mm,
redevelop it for us to live in a quality
mhm,
neighborhood so we won't
mhm,
have to bus our children somewhere. We don't have just different areas, different barriers that's keeping us from really living a true quality of life. Instead of you have to, take quote unquote handouts. So I think we just need to. I know it's it's idealistic to rip, the society from its roots, because all of this is systemic, and people do not want to have the conversation about it. All of this is systemic.
You think that that's and it speaks to a further discussion, Drea. Do you think that when you do start pulling the layers back and looking at what has been done, and you guys are in academia, so this is a very important question. What is the fear? Why the discussion? Nobody wants to have the discussion.
In class or out of class, or
Both.
just far as
Everything
what
is surface. You could get more done with the discussion on Twitter than you can get on a real deep dive discussion in a classroom.
right. To be honest with you, on my end in my classroom, I have really tough conversations about drug uses all the way down to domestic violence, because I tied in with my lesson. And so I'm glad that I'm at an institution where I can do that, because I'm not at a public university. If I was at a public
Okay.
university, I probably would have been up out of there. I would have been up out of there. But when you're at a private institution, you can incorporate those things, but also too, some of us, we want to have this. Everything is fine, and I just flash my smile, and even though I'm hurting, the generation that's coming up from behind me is hurting. Everything is fine, and people don't want to challenge the system. People don't want to buck against the system, so they be complacent. So that's why you see complacency in thinking. I always tell my students, you need to critically think, and you need to read at least 15 minutes a day to comprehend. Not read and strolling, but I need you to comprehend what you're reading, because your life is at risk.
Yeah, it's like for example, everything that we lead the discussion on within the culture, it's like it gets taken, then repackaged. It's like critical race theory. Just use that for example. We've been teaching critical race. That was the kitchen table conversation.
Right.
Um, we don't have a problem with history with our in this country. We just want history to be told without all the lies.
Mm-hmm.
So it's never been a problem if you've had that education at your kitchen table. We created, as we would say now, cancel culture, and it's funny because we created cancel culture as a way of getting at each other, but it's like it done took too far, and now like people get upset because they get canceled and they get done. Like, oh well, we. It's like every time we create a conversation or a conversation is made to address some of the issues that historically have plagued us in living in this country, it always get repackaged.
Mm-hmm.
And now the grifters come along and they start making money off of our
For the
tears.
culture.
One of the things that Keisha loves to say, and I'm a big proponent of her favorite statement: Black trauma is big business, baby.
It is.
And she speaks about that a lot.
It is.
So, is there anything you guys like to add before we close for today? I don't. I know it's a lot that we didn't discuss, and I'm quite sure we'll probably do another show on it. Like I told Julia, I don't think one show will be able to scratch the surface, but we just wanted to bring forth this information and just have this discussion to, as Julia say, have that deep breath, like, you know what I mean, be able to breathe and be like, yo, I hear you, I heard your cries, I'm listening to your stories, and be able to have a conversation with each other first, and then present what we conversating about to everyone else online or whatever. Any final thoughts, ladies?
You can call Julia, because you want me to go and you want to close it out.
No, I want you to close it out, Professor. I just had this last thing to say because I've been thinking about it since we started doing this. First of all, Quentin, thank you so much for presenting this topic to be discussed. Um, it's been a very healing process, a very healing journey, and it's just been a wonderful conversation, a beautiful evening. So thank you so much. But I want to touch on something that you said about repackaging. So we have this song WAP, right? And Cardi B, and there are probably about 1 million young women who learned about the importance of pH balance in your vagina through her and through that song. How influential could she be, right, if she had other conversations about sexual health, to go along with her brand, since she has all of these young women following her, and to understand that they don't have to use their bodies in that way, but understand and respect their bodies. And like the whole idea of sexualizing a healthy, fertile, clean, beautiful environment and just making it, something that, I got that WAP. Okay. But understand that means that you're eating well, you're drinking water, you're resting properly, you're choosing your partners carefully. That's what that means. That doesn't mean that you need to be out here twerking and whatever else they do. It just means your body is healthy. But, we take these things and, it's a lot. It's too much. So, we all have a responsibility, I think, to be mindful of the ways that we approach sexuality. Healthy
It's funny.
sexuality.
The great Frederick Douglass wrote a interesting piece that I like to read probably once every 3 months. And the title of the piece made me think about it when Julia just brought it up. It's called Our Composite Narrative.
Mm,
And one of the things is owning your narrative and owning your story,
mm,
owning how your story is presented to the world, and owning how the world really perceives your story. And you're right, Julia, how a hit song technically could have been an educational song, and taking the narrative and pushing it a different way, how it can have been perceived, and definitely dealing with sexuality, a woman knowing her body and understanding what goes on down there and why, and having a why, as my friend Dira was saying, knowing your why.
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Drea, did you have any final thoughts?
I totally agree. Just to add on and to close it out, we all have to know what our purpose and intentions are every day, especially being in the skin of being black. It's like, we hear black girl magic, yeah, but what's the purpose and what's the intentions behind
Mm,
sprinkling this magic? It can't just be about you got a passport, you with the Tulum. Cool, sis, that's cool. But what's the purpose behind that? How are you uplifting yourself and being in tune with yourself? So when you in tune, each one teach one. And so I tell my
mm,
students that all the time. Don't just obtain the knowledge for you, but how are you going to teach the next person? Or maybe even save the next person? Because lack of knowledge, we perish in that.
mm,
And I think a lot of times we get away from that because, we're so quick. I'm not trying to look stupid on social media. I'm going to argue this person down, but really process what this person is saying. So I think a lot of times, we have to really have more conversations like this, which was amazing. I know part 2, 3, 4, 5 is going to come, hopefully. And also to not depend on the school systems to teach our children.
right.
Education starts at home. Okay, you may
Mhm.
have a lack of knowledge. You got, guess what? This thing called a smartphone, and you
Everything.
could take virtual tours to different type of museums. The Legacy Museum in Montgomery, if you can't get down to Alabama, you got so many free resources. But once again, I always look at it. You got YouTube University. So instead of typing in WAP and you about to do your twerk for the night, type in something else, something educational. So not only you, but also your children can get educated on. So that's just mine to close it out for the night.
And I thank these ladies. And it's funny, like I always think about the whole twerking thing. perception and narrative for a black woman is twerking. For a black woman in America is twerking. For our sisters from the diaspora is cultural dancing.
Mm.
Always remember that a lot of people play these word games with us.
Mm.
And they'll put a spin on the culture, as we would say. So I appreciate you ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know that this subject could have been like really emotional. This was all about the spirit of Henrietta Lacks. I don't know what it was. I was doing some research and I just said, you know what, perfect show, perfect thing. I was in the right frame of thinking and said, you know, that we need to look into really giving her flowers. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, her cells were taken without her knowledge to be used in every. You'd be amazed how Hele is
Right.
short for her name, but they didn't use her name or acknowledge her family,
Exactly.
who people are billionaires based off of her stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
with that, I thank everybody in the chat for joining the show. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and have a blessed and safe night.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's show. Please continue to join us here for conversations on hot topics, interviews with special guests, and our featured programs such as the Poetry Corner, where you can hear dope poets from around the country creating that poet cafe vibe, and Crown Rules, our virtual book club on love, intimacy, and healthy relationships. Let's talk. We are everywhere you want to be. Follow us on YouTube at Let's Talk, Facebook at Let's Talk, and on Instagram at Let's Talk 1931. Have a suggestion? Give us a call at 570-795-4283. Or for business inquiries, please email us at ltalk5600@gmail. Let's talk. I wore to you, you wore to me, and we go together. Please don't forget to like, share, follow.